The fan car. In the world of Formula One, very few machines have terrified the grid before turning a single lap. The Brabom BT46B was one of them. Gordon Murray built this monster not to compete, but to annihilate. The problem? Ground effect was king in 1978. Lotus had mastered it with the 79, generating insane downforce through venturi tunnels. Brabom's flat 12 Alfa Romeo engine made that design nearly impossible, so Murray turned to something insane: suction. A giant fan at the back of the car extracted air from underneath the chassis. That created a low-pressure vacuum, literally sucking the car onto the tarmac. It didn't matter whether you were in a straight or corner, downforce was always there. The official story? It's just cooling the engine, Brabom insisted. But everyone knew. When Niki Lauda won the 1978 Swedish Grand Prix by 34 seconds without even pushing, the paddock revolted. Colin Chapman threatened to withdraw Lotus. Other teams accused Brabom of breaking the movable aero rule. Technically, it was legal, but politically, dead on arrival. The FIA banned it after one race. It remains F1's most dominant one-off car, undefeated and outlawed forever. The mass damper. If you watched the 2006 season and wondered why Fernando Alonso's Renault danced through corners like ballet, thank the mass damper. At first glance, it was a simple engineering solution, a 9-kilogram weight in the nose cone that moved to cancel out vibrations and pitch oscillations. But in practice, it was black magic. The car became more stable mid-corner, more responsive under braking, faster over bumps. It felt like a video game cheat code. Ferrari hated it. They filed protest after protest, and halfway through the season, just as Schumacher started closing the gap, the FIA declared it a movable aerodynamic device. Despite the fact it affected nothing outside the chassis, Renault was forced to remove it. Their performance dipped. The championship got tighter. Alonso still won the title, but many fans believe that without Ferrari's complaints, the R26 would have crushed the entire field by an even bigger margin. One tech piece, one ban. That's how thin the margins are at the top of F1. The double chassis. Colin Chapman was never one to play fair, he played to win. And in 1981, his response to rising chassis stiffness and driver discomfort was to build two cars in one. The Lotus 88 had an inner chassis holding the engine, fuel, and driver, fully compliant, but it was surrounded by a second outer shell that absorbed all the aerodynamic loads. The result? A comfortable ride and insane downforce. Chapman argued the outer shell wasn't a movable aerodynamic device because it wasn't actively changing. But rival teams cried foul. During scrutineering at the US Grand Prix West, protests came flying in. The FIA agreed. It never got past qualifying. Chapman was furious. The 88th never raced again, but its influence remains. Every modern F1 car's chassis construction owes something to that bold innovation. Fuel flow. Shenanigans Ferrari's 2019 straight line speed wasn't just impressive, it was suspicious. Their power unit suddenly found 30 to 50 horsepower more than any rival mid-season. Red Bull and Mercedes knew something was up. They filed formal complaints suggesting Ferrari was injecting fuel outside the legal flow window, using short pulses the FIA sensor couldn't detect. The FIA couldn't prove it. Instead, they signed a private agreement with Ferrari. The term? Still classified. But after the announcement, Ferrari's performance vanished. They went from pole contenders to midfielders overnight. That led to outrage. Mercedes' Toto Wolff said the lack of transparency was unacceptable. Red Bull's Christian Horner called it shady. The FIA, cornered by public pressure, introduced a second flow meter in 2020, and Ferrari never recovered. Cheating or legal gray area doesn't matter. The court of paddock opinion convicted them anyway. The hidden fuel tank. In 2005, BarHonda thought they found a loophole. Their car passed minimum weight regulations, but only after the race when the FIA drained the fuel. What they discovered shocked everyone. The car had an illegal second chamber in the fuel tank. It allowed Bar to start the race underweight, then refuel mid-run using fuel hidden below the sensor level. The team claimed it was a safety margin. The FIA called it fraud. Bar was handed a 2-race ban, one of the harshest punishments in modern F1 history. The move destroyed their credibility and shattered trust between the team and the governing body. From title contender to disgrace, all thanks to 10 kilos of illegal fuel. F-duct. That changed rules. McLaren didn't invent the F-duct just to gain speed. They did it to make everyone else chase. By blocking a cockpit duct with his left knee, the driver could stall the rear wing at high speed, cutting drag and increasing top-end velocity. No moving parts, no electronics, just brilliant airflow manipulation. It worked. Hamilton and Button flew past rivals on straights even with less power. Other teams scrambled to replicate it with varying success. The FIA was caught off guard. It wasn't illegal, just clever. But by 2011, they changed the rules. No driver-operated aerodynamic devices. The F-duct was gone, but its spirit lived on in DRS one year. Massive impact. That's F1 innovation at its peak and its limit. The illegal car that never raced Toyota left F1 at the end of 2009, officially due to the global financial crisis. But they didn't just walk away. They left behind a bombshell. The TF110, their 2010 prototype, was a beast. Low-slung, aggressive, and rumored to be packing a double diffuser 2.0, the car had radical rear packaging that exploited flexi floor gray zones, an extreme F-duct integration, and an ultra-low center of gravity. When Stefan GP tried to acquire Toyota's entry and run the TF110, the FIA blocked it, not just for political reasons, but because engineers feared the car would have exposed just how close Toyota had come to crossing into too illegal-to-prove territory. The TF110 never raced, but its ghost haunts F1 to this day. Some say it could have been a race winner straight out of the box. Others say it would have been disqualified within 3 rounds. Steering that changed F1. When Mercedes rolled into preseason testing in Barcelona, cameras caught something insane. The front wheels moved as Lewis Hamilton pushed and pulled the steering wheel. It wasn't suspension failure, it was DAS, dual axis steering. By pulling the wheel, Hamilton could adjust the toe angle of the front tires on the fly. On straights, he'd straighten them for less scrub and tire wear. In corners, he'd push them back into toe out for better turn-in and heat up. Totally innovative. Totally legal that year. Red Bull immediately filed complaints, but the FIA let it run. Mercedes used it all season. Then for 2021, the FIA outlawed it with a one-line rule tweak. Steering systems may not alter more than one axis at a time. No fine, no penalty. Just a surgical strike to kill innovation after it worked. Flexiwing Madness. The RB6 was the ultimate gray area car. Its rear wing passed all FA load tests in static conditions, but on track, it visibly flexed downward at high speeds, reducing drag and creating a DRS-like effect before DRS existed. Photos from Spa and Monza showed the wing bowing under load. McLaren and Ferrari howled. The FIA responded with updated load tests, doubling the weight and adding lateral stress. And what happened? Red Bull's dominance didn't disappear, but it became a little more mortal. The Flexiwing tech wasn't new, but Red Bull exploited it better than anyone. And by the time the rules changed, they'd already built a title-winning car around it. The most suspicious legal car, Michael Schumacher's Benetton B194, was fast. Too fast. Especially compared to Ayrton Senna's Williams, supposedly the best car on the grid. After Imola, where Senna tragically died, the scrutiny on Benetton exploded. Rumors spread about illegal traction control software. Then came evidence. FIA found launch control code hidden deep in the engine management software. Benetton's defense? We never activated it. The FIA couldn't prove it was used during races, so no penalty was issued. But for fans and rival teams, the damage was done. Benetton had outcoded the system and left a permanent scar on Schumacher's first world title. The identity crisis, Toro Rosso was supposed to be Red Bull's junior team, a proving ground. But by 2008, they weren't just sharing engines, they were sharing chassis blueprints. The STR3 was essentially a rebadged Red Bull RB4. It ran with Ferrari power, but the aero philosophy, gearbox housing, and suspension setup were direct clones of the senior team's design. This broke the Concorde Agreement, which required every constructor to design its own car. But Toro Rosso got around it with clever legal separation. Red Bull Technologies sold the design to both teams. It wasn't technically illegal, but it was enough for the FIA to rework constructor definitions the very next year. The third brake pedal mystery. McLaren crushed the 1998 season with the MP4/13, a car so well balanced it looked glued to the track. The secret? A hidden brake steer system operated by a third pedal. By braking individual rear wheels mid-corner, the system eliminated understeer and helped maintain throttle through corners. Rivals protested. The FIA deemed it legal for 3 races, then they banned it after further review. Why? Because it mimicked traction control. And while McLaren wasn't fined or stripped, the car's competitive edge was dulled just enough to close the gap. Again, McLaren didn't cheat, they innovated, but the FIA drew the line after they'd crossed it. Bargeboards Flex. In 2004, Sauber found themselves under investigation when rival teams noticed their bargeboards, those small aerodynamic vanes near the floor, flexed under cornering load. The effect? They channeled airflow more aggressively toward the rear diffuser under high speed, while sitting within legal bounds in the wind tunnel. The FIA did an inspection. Nothing failed outright, but the intent was clear. Sauber was forced to reinforce the structure mid-season. It didn't lead to any penalties. But the design sparked a wave of aerodynamic tightening in 2005, especially around underbody airflow regulation. Sometimes you don't need to get banned, just noticed, for the FIA to rewrite the rulebook. Thermopaint. Aerohack Jaguar's R5 wasn't remembered for speed, but for one of the strangest illegal aero tricks ever. Their side pods were painted with a special coating that heated and contracted at high speed. The result? It subtly reshaped the airflow over the rear end of the car during straights, reducing drag. It was like morphing aerodynamics. before active aero was legal. A curious engineer from Renault picked up on the discoloration patterns and filed a quiet complaint. The FIA didn't fine Jaguar, but the tech was banned in silence, and Jaguar fell further into irrelevance, a team known more for gimmicks than results. Underfloor Flex controversy. Red Bull didn't just win in 2022, they dominated. But midway through the season, rival teams started asking questions. The issue? Floor plank flexibility. The RB18 appeared to comply with FIA's static deflection tests, but under dynamic load on track, it seemed the edges of the plank were flexing more than they should, reducing porpoising and creating extra ground effect. It wasn't just Red Bull. Ferrari too was suspected. So the FIA responded with Technical Directive 39. New tests were introduced. Flexing tolerances tightened. Fast forward a few races, Ferrari's straight line performance dropped. Red Bull stayed strong, but the gap had shrunk. No team was penalized. But everyone knew the directive wasn't random. It was targeted, and it reminded the grid that even a millimeter of flex could decide the championship. Suspension geometry's secrets Ligier had no business finishing on podiums in 1996. But in Monaco, Olivier Panis won a race of attrition. What caught attention wasn't just the result, it was how the JS43 behaved over bumps. Post-race investigations revealed unusual rear suspension linkage, believed to act like a primitive version of active ride height control. Ligier swore it was passive. The FIA wasn't convinced. The design was quietly outlawed the next season, not because it failed scrutineering, but because of its intent. Ligier faded into obscurity after, but for one race they showed how geometry could be as powerful as horsepower. Oil burn trick. Alfa Romeo's 2020 car wasn't a frontrunner, but its engine had Ferrari DNA. That meant scrutiny. Their combustion process was flagged during the mid-season checks for oil flow regulation abuse, essentially burning oil as an extra fuel source during ignition, which had been under strict monitoring since 2018. The trick? Injecting microscopic oil traces into combustion at peak load, bypassing sensors. Legal in the margins, illegal in spirit. The FIA sent a notice. Alfa Romeo adjusted the system. Their qualifying delta dropped. Quiet scandal, no fine, but a loud message. We're watching. X-Wing Aeroban. The A22 introduced a set of vertical aero fins extending above the cockpit, nicknamed X-Wings. They weren't beautiful, but they worked. Generating extra downforce over the center of the car, they helped balance Aero's tricky mid-corner behavior. Other teams hated them. Jordan and Sauber threatened protests, not because it was unsafe, but because it looked unsafe. The FIA responded brutally. Mid-season, a technical directive was issued banning any bodywork above the chassis reference plane that wasn't part of the roll hoop or mirrors. The X-Wings were dead. Aero's performance nosedived. Too smart to be legal. If the FW14B raced today, it would be illegal on every level. Active suspension, traction control, semi-automatic gearbox, ABS, data-logged throttle mapping, it had it all. In 1992, Nigel Mansell crushed the championship in it. The car was unbeatable, but it also triggered a panic. The FIA, worried that F1 was becoming too automated, began preparing for mass bans. By 1994, all the tech was outlawed. No fines, no cheating, just pure dominance that forced the sport to slow itself down. The FW14B wasn't just an illegal car, it was the reason the rules changed. Paddleshift Revolution Ferrari introduced the first ever paddleshift semi-automatic gearbox with the 640. It revolutionized F1, removing the need for an H-pattern shifter, allowing drivers to keep both hands on the wheel and shift faster than ever. The problem? Mid-season, FIA officials realized Ferrari's electronics allowed for pre-programmed gear cycles. Hit the paddle once, and the system could shift multiple times automatically, mimicking an early version of sequential or even automatic shifting. It wasn't specifically illegal, because the rules didn't cover it yet, but after the season, that loophole closed. Now, shifting must be one command equals one gear. Ferrari walked the line, reshaped the sport, and made the FIA rewrite the rulebook. Rear wing twist. In early 2007, BMW Sauber shocked the grid by consistently qualifying at the front. Their rear wing design featured a torsional flex bracket that passed vertical load tests, but subtly twisted under lateral stress. The result? Better top speed on straights, more grip in corners. McLaren and Ferrari cried foul. The FIA launched an inspection. BMW was told to reinforce the structure immediately. They complied, and suddenly the top speed advantage was gone. No penalty, no disqualification. But just like Red Bull years later, the secret advantage evaporated the moment the scrutiny arrived. Cooling hole trickery. Desperate for performance, Jordan tried a unique trick in 2003, adding tiny bodywork holes labeled as cooling ducts. That, in practice, directed airflow toward the diffuser to energize underfloor suction. It worked. Their rear-end grip increased, especially on slow circuits like Hungary. The FIA reviewed the bodywork post-race and ruled that the holes were aerodynamic devices masquerading as cooling features, which broke the regs. Jordan was forced to redesign. They never scored again that season.